Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a twice-weekly podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from channel strategies to tariffs, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers, or what we call R-commerce. Now here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I am your host, Luke Peters, and this is the podcast where I bring you the best and brightest leaders to share consumer product sales and marketing strategies that'll help you grow your business. But in this episode, we have another special episode on the coronavirus, and I'm thrilled to have a molecular and cellular immunology PhD, Vishal Khairnar, on the episode. Thanks for joining us, Vishal.
Thank you, Luke, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Great. And a quick bio for Vishal. Vishal is a research scientist, expertise in immunology and cancer biology with respect to infectious disease, viruses, including things like influenza and Listeria and different pneumonias, expertise in immunotherapy, leukemia, lymphoma. He's a fellow at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a young investigator, award winner. He's a highly skilled researcher with 9 years of experience in immunology research with 15 high-impact papers and 5 conference abstracts. And again, PhD in molecular and cellular immunology. Sorry, a lot of big words here, Vishal, but really a pleasure to have you on the Page One Podcast talking again about the coronavirus. And I know it's current news, and just to let you know, Vishal, in our industry, we have a big show called the Houseware Show, the International Houseware Show. It's in Chicago. It was going to happen around March 13th or 14th, and it was canceled. So there have been a lot of big trade show cancellations. Our audience is really familiar with that one, which kind of rocked our industry, and surprising because there's so few cases here in America right now, but everybody is taking the utmost caution to make sure that this thing doesn't spread like it has elsewhere in the world. So that's why it's important to our listeners. I thought that'd be important for you to know. And after that introduction, why don't we I put down some questions that I thought would be interesting in there. For the listeners, you guys listening, these will be interesting from the point of really learning more details about this virus, because a lot of the numbers are going to be all over the news, and the location of the virus, and how to washing your hands with soap and all of those common sense things. So hopefully we're going to talk about some subjects that are a little less commonly talked about. And so why don't we start with this first question, which is the origin of this virus. How did it mutate? It sounds like patient zero, we've been hearing different things, and I've read that patient zero may not have been at the animal market in Wuhan. I know we don't know the final answers here, but any thoughts on how this virus could have mutated from an animal to a human host?
Yeah, sure. So I would basically give a little bit background or information about this virus and why it is it's called as a novel coronavirus. So the coronaviruses are different families of viruses, and contains different virus types, subtypes as well. And we have identified the first coronavirus in 1960s, and some member of this family have since been identified, including a very famous SARS coronavirus, which was in 2003, MERS coronavirus in 2012, and now it's called as a SARS-CoV-2, which we call it as a coronavirus 19, which is emerging from Wuhan, which is in the province, Hubei province of China. So it was first identified in Wuhan. That's why it's called as a COVID-19 Wuhan coronavirus. And the initial observations where people developed pneumonia without a clear cause, and for which the existing vaccines or treatments were not effective. And the little bit history about this virus is that what we know from the researchers who used an analysis of the protein codes favored by new coronavirus and compared it to protein codes from coronaviruses found in different animal hosts like birds, snakes, mantis, bats, or humans. And surprisingly, they found that the protein code of this SARS-CoV-2 are more similar to those in snakes. And the theory or the hypothesis is the snakes often hunt from bats in wild, and the reports indicate that snakes were sold in the local seafood market in Wuhan, raising the possibility that the COVID-19 might have jumped from the host species bats to snakes and then to humans. However, the virus could adapt to both cold-blooded and warm-blooded hosts remains a mystery, and also the spread of the virus through snakes or bats is not backed up by scientific studies. So far, these are just the hypotheses and these are just the assumptions, but we don't know the exact source of this virus. But definitely, it is emerged from the seafood market in Wuhan. That's what we know for sure.
Great, thanks for that. Now you're going to have my wife's going to be really worried because my son just got a new snake. So it's funny. I'm just kidding, but that's so interesting that that it's similar, or the core protein is similar to that of a snake, and it's cold-blooded. And I was always thinking that it would be hard for any bacteria or virus that was living in a cold-blooded organism to jump to a warm-blooded organism. But it sounds like those types of things happen.
Yes, but these are just the assumptions, and we're still waiting for new data and research papers which back up this the current scenario.
Yep. Okay, great. So let's go to the next question, because this one is about the transmissibility, or the R naught, I guess is the big buzzword in the media. And why is the R naught so high? And again, we may not know specifically, or maybe we do, but maybe in general for some viruses, why would it be so high? This virus, I think, has a cell membrane. I read that it can live outside of the body for a couple of days, which is relatively long. But what other factors play into transmissibility, or an R naught value being higher than, say, the flu, which I guess is under 1.5? I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
So let me give a little information about what the R value is. So to the general audience, the R0 number, or the reproduction number R0, is what happens is that when a new disease emerges, the health organization turns to a seemingly simple number to gauge whether the outbreak will spread or not. And it is called the basic reproduction number, or it is also called as R0. So in brief, R0 is the average number of people who will catch the disease from single infected person in a population that's never seen the disease, meaning that basically how many new individuals can a single infected person can pass the disease to. And as you mentioned, different viruses have different R0 numbers, and currently from the data which we have at this moment, the R0 number for the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, is between 2 to 3.4, meaning that each infected person can potentially infect to between 2 and 3.4 or 3.5 new individuals. And basically it's seemingly little bit high compared to what we have other RNA viruses such as Ebola or seasonal flu, which has the R0 rate up to 2 or 1.3 respectively. And this is in between, this is little bit higher than Ebola and seasonal flu, but there are other viruses like Zika viruses, measles and HIV, which have more or higher R0 rates compared to the novel coronavirus. And the reason, the basic reason, in my understanding, is the most of the people who were first encountered with this novel coronavirus, the symptoms are very similar to the flu infection, or basically the normal cold or flu infection in general, what we have called as a seasonal flu. And these people were treated for that kind of, basically received this treatment for combating seasonal flu. And 80% of the population was basically treated like that. But unfortunately, that did not lead to improvement of their health. And that's how it passed on, because initially we failed to recognize it as a novel virus, or this strain was never seen before. And I think that is the main reason why what I think that led to the outbreak of this virus, or so many people are infected this virus.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sounds like there's a little confusion and people don't know it's actually something different, and they might come in contact with people. So, that makes. Now, talking about what's interesting is, some of the pharmaceutical companies have quickly even come to the point where it sounds like they have a vaccine ready for test, which is amazingly quick. But at the same time, they say that the final commercial use won't be for a year. And I know that there has to be some human testing involved, obviously, and that can take a couple of months. But what is the most up-to-date information on the timelines around the vaccine? And does it still seem like it's about a year out? And is there any way for these companies to potentially move that quicker for, say, healthcare workers or those that are right in the front lines for the coronavirus?
So as of today, we don't have a vaccine yet. So we don't have a particular vaccine which can combat, which is against the novel coronavirus. But the good news is that a lot of other companies, and which I was reading just in the morning, companies, for example, Moderna, now the report is that FDA has completed its review of this mRNA 1217, the potential vaccine for this coronavirus. And now the reports are, FDA has allowed it to proceed to clinic, and basically they are now proceeding with their the vaccine into clinics for the trials. And this is quite encouraging, because I hope that this will result into some kind of vaccine or particular or perfect vaccine therapy. But not only Moderna, I would like to tell you other companies which, to my knowledge, are, for example, Gilead, Johnson & Johnson, Vir Biotechnology, and few other companies, including NIH itself, the research division of NIH itself, are trying to basically test different vaccine for the phase 1 clinical trial. And some reports I have also read that some companies are also testing if the already available vaccine, which were for the influenza virus, if they can be also used for the treatment of this virus, because this virus shares a lot of homology with the influenza virus, and that's why they are trying to understand, or trying to see that if the current regime is also can be used for novel coronavirus. And these are in quite in advanced stages, and I hope, as you mentioned, that some people might think that it will not be available up to 1 year. So we don't know it. It depends on the success of the vaccine, if it proceeds to the different clinical stages, and how potent the vaccine is. But definitely, I can see to see a bigger picture, or that we will have a vaccine in maybe next 3 to 5 months. So, but that is my speculation, depending on the current scenario. But it might take longer, or it can take even less time compared to 3 or 5 months as well.
Great, thanks for that, Vishal. And let's talk about how the virus enters the body. I always assumed, viruses like the flu, that you'd be breathing them in. I don't know. For some reason, I just assumed that droplets on surfaces wasn't the more common transmission method, but it seems in the news that that's how, with the hand washing, like that really is, a common transmission method. And I guess the question here is there a way to, proportionately say that, more often than not you breathe it in, or more often than not it's because of droplets that you put on your hand and rub in your eyes and nose and mouth? I'm curious, really on that question on the transmission and your thoughts there.
Yes, I mean, one thing for sure too is that it's a respiratory virus, and basically it has to, if the virus has to infect the body, it has to come into one of the organs in the respiratory system, either via nose, via eye, or via mouth, and should basically lead to a respiratory system. And this virus, so it's very similar, or the transmission is quite similar to the influenza virus as well. And in order to basically answer your question in more scientific point of view, how does the virus enters the body? So we have to understand a little bit the structure of the novel coronavirus. And so far what we know is that, like other coronaviruses, the SARS-CoV-2 has 4 structured proteins known as S called spike, E envelope, M membrane, and N nucleocapsid proteins. And basically these S, E, and M proteins are the ones which are involved in the entering of the pathogen, or entering of the virus into the system. And specifically, the spike protein is responsible for allowing the virus to attach to the membrane of the host cell. And this is how we know from the current protein modeling experiments that how it is attached. And people also said there are reports which shows that we call it as a angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE2. It might be too scientific, but it's just a receptor of human cells to use them as a mechanism to cell entry. And this is the reason why it is so virulent, is that studies have shown or proven that this novel coronavirus has a higher affinity for the human ACE2 receptor. And that is the reason why one of the reason why this is so the virulence rate is high, and the common things which you already mentioned about the washing hands and other precautions. So they are right. So at this moment, what we can do is that there is a very common term which we call it as the prevention is better than cure. So at this moment, until we don't have a vaccine, don't have straightforward vaccine, so what we can do is to take preventive measures. And basically what you explain is, I would also suggest the same, that washing your hands with hand sanitizers, basically alcohol-based hand sanitizers. And another way is also washing your hands thoroughly with the soap and then with water. And also try not and this people should do as often as possible. And if you are a worker, or if you are a person who have frequent contacts with basically with many people, or if you are working in a mall, or if you are working basically at any organization which has to deal with contacting with different objects, or communicating with different people at the same time, I would highly recommend to take all these precautionary measures. Okay,
that makes sense. And so, like you said, the virus has a special protein on it, and that can attach to I think you called it the ACE2 receptor. And that's, yes. Okay, great. And that's how it enters the body, which is just amazing when people think about these things, this thing that basically isn't even alive, it can't reproduce itself, but it has this special protein that can, attach to one of our special proteins on our cells. And now, is the ACE2 receptor, is that unique to human beings, or just unique to mammals, or, where is that on, is that, so in other words, if dogs had this receptor, could the virus, infect a dog as well?
So, I think what I may not have that much information regarding a different ACE receptors or regarding this receptors in different mammals. But what I would say is that that is most likely that this kind of receptors or AC receptors are also present in other mammals, because otherwise that would be impossible, or that would be quite difficult for a virus to jump from host to another host. And that's really one of the things which I would like to say, that the AC receptors, which are very unique, which we have anyway in mammals or humans, basically, I think similar or same receptors are also present in the other mammals as well. Otherwise, the chances of host jump are very little.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so now the virus is inside, it goes in through that receptor. And now if you can quickly answer, how does the virus actually cause sickness? And, is it due to cell death? I know, the virus then comes in and I think it replicates, right? It starts replicating itself. And then eventually, when there's enough of them, it'll burst out of the cell. And I believe, if I'm remembering all the way back to school. So, but anyways, it, bursts out of the cell and causes cell death. Is that essentially the mode of, on the surface, the sickness we see? Is that the underlying cause?
Sure. So not only for this virus infection or any other virus infection or bacterial infections, what decides the immune reaction is the viral load. So let's consider a virus, or basically any foreign antigen. Yeah, when our body is infected by certain virus, immune cell recognize this antigen as a foreign particle. And then it starts initiating immune responses. We call it as innate immune responses, which is the first line of defense. And the extent of the immune activation actually depends on the antigen load. So how much virus or how much virus is present, or antigen is present in the system. And the immune activation leads to secretion of a lot of antiviral factors in the body, and which basically are our machinery to combat the antigen or the virus pathogen. And the severity of the disease depends on the antigen load and how strong the immune system is activated, and that differs from person to person as well. So the very important thing, the observation, what we understand or what we see from this novel coronavirus is that young people are less susceptible, or the mortality rate in the people who are less than 60 years old is quite less compared to people who are more than 60 years old. It is 2 or 3.5, basically 2 versus up to 14% in the older population. So we also have to understand that the virulence, or how the virus actually sickens our body, is also depends on how active our immune system is, and also the immune system of a particular individual and the hygienic condition or the particular individual is. And you are right. Basically, there are different mechanisms about how virus can be neutralized in the system. There are different mechanisms. There are antibodies. There are different adaptive immune cells which are taking care of pathogens at different levels. And as you mentioned about the if the cell is infected, and then if the cell goes to a death, or if that can lead to some strong immune activation. So this is the cell death is basically one of the mechanisms, or one of the ways how virus infected cells can be eliminated, or basically gets eliminated from our system in order to protect other cells, that to avoid the other nearby healthy cells to get infected from one individual infected cell. So that is also one of the mechanisms, and there are different ways how the infected cell will be get eliminated from or basically get killed from the system. Is there are different apoptosis and program death related pathways associated with the cell death as well. So it depends on different mechanisms, but the cell death is one of the mechanisms how our immune system basically gets rid of the pathogen infected or antigen infected cells from the body.
Got it. Specifically, Vishal, is when somebody dies or somebody has to go to ICU, obviously their respiratory system in this virus, it seems like it hits the respiratory system. They're having trouble breathing. They have to be intubated or have assisted breathing occurring. Now I know it's very complicated what's going on underneath, but is that due to a lot of lung cells dying from the virus, or is it due to the immune response causing problems in the lungs because it's like a massive, immune response that is going to have other negative effects? Is it one or the other?
Yeah, I think it's more a medical question, or the person who can answer this question is maybe a medical doctor. But what I understand from the infection point of view is that basically when there is already a virus infected into the system and the person is sick, basically the symptoms are related to the respiratory illness or basically problem in breathing. The reason is that maybe the lungs get swollen because of a lot of immune reactions, and it cannot function properly. And one of the reasons is also getting cough into the lungs, and that also causes problems in breathing. So these are different ways how there are basically hindrances in normal breathing, and I guess that's one of the reasons that the lungs are basically inflamed, and that basically causes the disturbances into normal breathing. So that is basically more scientific way to look at it.
Yes, that is helpful. And I guess, we've talked a lot about the influenza virus, and can you do a quick comparison of the influenza versus the COVID-19? Or, just quick, do they both have a cell membrane? I know the new novel coronavirus does, I believe, and I think it's an RNA virus. Is one larger than the other? Would be interesting, I think, for the audience to hear a quick comparison of the two different viruses.
Yes, sure. So basically, what we know about the novel coronavirus is so far how much is the size of this virus. It's basically approximately 27 to 34 kilobases, and the size I don't have exact number. I tried to find in the literature, but I couldn't find it. I don't know how long is that. For example, whether it's a nanometer, basically 5 nanometers or 10 nanometers. I don't have an idea about that. But for sure, we have the molecular structure, and we know that from its molecular structure is 27 to 34 kilobases. And for common flu, or basically, there are different types of flu, influenza, and when we talk about the common flu, it's an influenza A virus. Basically, this virus also has. What's different is that there are several subtypes and labeled according to an H number for the type of the hemagglutinin, and the N number for the type of neuraminidase in the influenza A viruses. And so far, there are 18 different known H antigens from H1 to H18, and 11 different known N antigens from N1 to N11 for the influenza viruses. And basically, these viruses are 80 to 120 nanometers in diameter. And because it's a wide variety of combinations that can happen because of mutations in this virus, we have different. When I was reading, there are up to 198 possibilities which can be come up with common flu virus or influenza viruses. But let's go very general similarities between this virus and flu is that the COVID-19, the virus CoV-2, the coronavirus CoV-2, and the flu is the symptoms. They both cause fever, cough, body ache, fatigue, sometimes vomiting, and diarrhea. And it can be mild or severe, even fatal in rare cases. And sometimes more complications in the immune system can also result in the pneumonia after infection of these viruses. And the transmission mode of infection is that both can spread from person to person through droplet in the air, basically from the infected person coughing, sneezing, or talking and cause respiratory illness. And a possible difference between COVID-19 might be spread through the airborne route. So for the infection with the novel coronavirus, you have to get the virus basically into your respiratory system. And we still don't know that it is possible to get this virus through the airborne route, but so far from the literature, the possibility is quite low. And flu can be spread by an infected person for several days before their symptoms appear. And also understand from the literature, which is there for novel coronavirus, that even though incubation period is between 2 to 14 days, it doesn't necessarily mean that in this incubation period that particular individual cannot infect other healthy patients. So basically, both in this case are similar for the spread of the disease. And the major difference would be what is the major difference is just the different strains. Yes, the COVID-19 is caused by one novel 2019 coronavirus, which is definitely different from previous coronaviruses. And it is also called as now the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, as we already talked about this a lot, or the SARS-CoV. And the flu is caused by any of the several different types and strains of influenza viruses, which I briefly touched in the previous question. So there are very basic differences between different strains, but they belong to the same family. And one of the things I want to mention is that they both are RNA viruses, and the mutation in the RNA viruses tend to be high, but as we did not encounter a second outbreak from the 2003 SARS virus, I would highly doubt that this virus will get mutated and then will come back again, because from 2003 until 2020, we did not get the second outbreak of the SARS virus. So I would suspect that, or I would at least guess that that is highly unlikely that this virus will mutate and then will come back. But definitely there are chances that maybe new strain completely different from what we already know from the SARS, MERS, or this novel coronavirus. There might be another strain jumping in near future.
Yeah, and I saw like a famous epidemiologist, and he said that he thought, and he made a big remark, but that 40% of the world's population will end up getting this virus, just because of the R naught. And but to your point, if it can't mutate, I think a lot of folks are worried about it, being similar to the flu, where every year you've got a new outbreak of this, but it's different because it's a new flu virus every year. And so I think, like you said, they're both RNA viruses, but in this case, hopefully this virus, we don't have a new version every single year. So we just have to deal with it, or hopefully a vaccine is created. But thanks for that comparison and that information. And last I read, and I've looked at this a little bit just because it's important, is that the virus can live for around 5 days in optimal condition outside the body. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything different? Is this some? And the reason I ask is, you see governments spraying subways, and they're taking all these precautions with the virus on the ground, or maybe it's on hard surfaces, and and if there's enough of a viral load, it can kind of survive for a longer period of time. But is this virus any different than others as far as being able to survive longer outside of the host?
So I think that's true that under normal conditions or optimum conditions, this virus can live up to 5 days. And we're still waiting for the research or waiting for the new data which back up it strongly. But that's true. And basically, what my understanding is that why government officials are basically taking measures by maybe decontaminating the subways or places for public gatherings. One of the reasons is the subway is mainly or the underground trains. When you go there, quite humid in the nature, and it's we just have the winter season is going on, and most of the parts in the world there's still quite temperature is quite low. So there's a lot of moisture, humidity in the air, and the temperature is not that high. So one of the things also people think or believe that unlike last SARS virus outbreak, that when the temperature rises, the rising temperature might potentially also reduce the half-life of the virus on the surface or basically in the form of droplets. And but the basic reason why to do or decontaminate the places are basically reduce the chances of the virus to be present there for longer time. And this actually is main reason is that the humidity and temperature which prolongs the half-life of the virus. And subways, airports, or malls, basically these are the places where you have a lot of people at one point present while commuting or while doing or buying or shopping. So these things are just preliminary measures which are taken to avoid that the spread of the virus will be reduced from one person to another person in the form of if unintentionally if people touch a surface and then basically with their hand while touching their hand to their mouth, nose, or eyes, that can basically potentially can also enter their respiratory tract or respiratory system. So this is one of the major, and I also there are a lot of reports which also hints in that direction that rise in temperature might also lead to the reduction in the half-life of this virus as well.
Well, that would be good news here in America with summer coming. So we're, a couple months away from that. And I think people are hoping that'll be the case. So I guess we're going to find out in a couple months. So
people are hoping because we already experienced a similar thing in the last SARS outbreak when in the winter season it was spreading quite fast, and when the summer season started, the rate of infections were reduced, and this is maybe people are thinking that might be the case also with this virus, but we will have to see and we will have to maybe see in future how it goes.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, last question is, quickly, what are your thoughts? As a trained scientist, when you see trade shows being canceled, it seems like extreme caution. And then unfortunately, there seems to be a little bit of panic and hysteria in the public. But at the same time, people are dying from this virus. And I'm definitely not one to underestimate that, because the death rate seems to be like more than 20 times higher than a flu. Mm-hmm. And when you put it in that perspective, if it went through 40% of the population, it could really be devastating. And so I can understand both sides, but is there, in the scientific community, do they think that what's the general thought when they see trade shows and travel and everything being canceled?
Yeah, so you're right that in certain cases the trade shows or the exhibitions are cancelled, and I know I was listening to one of the documentary, and I also realized that the Auto Expo in Geneva was also cancelled, and there was a major immunology conference in Japan that was also cancelled. But I think for a general audience, what I would recommend is that, of course, as I said, prevention is better than cure. So if you can, then I would definitely avoid traveling to, first of all, on my list would be traveling to places which have more coronavirus cases, basically mainland China, South Korea, Iran, Italy, and in these countries where at this moment the cases are high and the chances that might be more people who are already infected, but the virus is just in incubation period, and we will see how it goes. But first thing would be try to avoid travel if that is possible. Second thing is what I would suggest is to quarantine yourself if you can. Basically, what happens is that the symptoms of this viral infection are very similar to seasonal flu. And I would highly recommend people that if they have similar symptoms, which they think they are just a common seasonal flu symptoms, at this moment, I would highly encourage to basically go to hospitals and go to or show yourself to a physician or a doctor and get it confirmed that you are not the one of the person who catches the coronavirus or novel coronavirus. So I would highly recommend that. Second would be hand washing and disinfection of the surfaces. Basically, that what we already talked about at the beginning. That is two preventive measures, and the public gatherings. Basically, try to avoid places where you have to encounter basically you have to be with a lot of people, and if you can avoid basically some certain things like. Avoid contact with body fluids or don't or basically keep distance if someone is sneezing or coughing around you. So I would highly recommend to keep yourself a bit distance from these people, and for general population also to get this the common etiquettes would be very important. That if you are sneezing or coughing, use napkins or tissues and basically try to minimize the exposure of your cough or sneezing to nearby population. So that is some things, and simple hygiene measures would impact a lot on day-to-day basis. And last but not least would be that basically don't take it like lightly. Don't think that this is just a common cold or flu symptoms. I would highly encourage people, if they see such symptoms, try to consult a doctor as soon as possible, because that's one of the best things you can do to protect yourself and your family or your relatives which are very living nearby to you.
Great. Well, thanks for all that advice, and especially for joining me on the Page One podcast today with this special update on the coronavirus, and appreciate, Vishal, all your information and details about the virus. And hopefully the listeners got some unique information today, maybe something different than you guys have heard, on the regular news outlets. So I want to thank you again for joining us. Is there a best place if listeners might want to reach out and ask a question? Is there, best to connect on LinkedIn or anywhere else that you would prefer to send them?
Yes, I mean, I'm active on social sites, LinkedIn. If you can find me with LinkedIn, and I'm sure when you broadcast your postdoc, I will be happy if you can put my information or contact information or LinkedIn. Share my LinkedIn link so that people can ask or comment or follow up all this literature or basically information. And if there is any concern, people can reach out to you or me directly at any time point. And at the end of the session, I would also like to thank all this information basically where I collected from is all the numbers over the coronavirus and the mortality rate or number of deaths basically coming from the coronavirus VID19 global cases by Johns Hopkins CSSE. If people want to stay updated with this information, there is a very nice platform developed by Johns Hopkins CSSE. You can put in Google, and basically that can lead to you a site where you can track all this information. They have made it very nice way that the confirmed cases, how the virus is spreading, and confirm number of deaths and number of people recovering. And also, I would encourage to just simply, you can go on Google or any social media site, try to access the WHO site, World Health Organization sites. And if you just put WHO coronavirus, there will be a lot of pages which will redirect you to the WHO sites, and there is also nice information and quite updated information available. So I would highly encourage people, and basically I will also thank at the end of my presentation or end of our talk, these 2 or 3 resources, Johns Hopkins CSSE website, WHO official website, and some of the literatures from leading journals like Nature and Cell, which I took some information from. So these are the resources, these are the information sources for myself and as well as for common people to have access, and these are free of cost. So with this novel virus, the good thing is that many journals, many research publication house made this as a by looking it as a public health concern. They have provided all the related information quite free to access.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for that, Vishal. And absolutely, in the show notes, we'll have your LinkedIn and your full name, so spelled out, so the listeners can contact you and appreciate listing those resources. So we have that for the audience, and that'll end up in the show notes.
Thank you.
And again, I just want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Page One podcast, sponsored by Retail Band. You can contact me on LinkedIn or at luke@retailband.com. Thanks for making it through this podcast. We appreciate all of your comments and especially your reviews, and we'll catch you guys on the next podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our other segments. Also, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to learn more about our commerce? Check out www.retailband.com to get more great tips and tricks on how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers.